A story about goals, motivation, and purpose. The accident many years ago, at a time when there were no satellite phones and flying was a real challenge. Guillermo, who was a commercial pilot, was flying over the Andes mountain range when his plane, which was a single-engine model, began to have a malfunction in the motor. Immediately, Guillermo thought of an emergency landing and with great effort managed to descend, falling on the mountain in the part completely covered with snow. Although he wasn't seriously injured, he had deep wounds on both of his legs, which made it very difficult for him to walk. With great effort, he got out of the cockpit and out of the crashed plane and tried to get in touch by radio, but it didn't work. Looking at his legs, he was sure he couldn't get out of there alone. He looked at the horizon in all directions and saw only snow. Even knowing that region, Guillermo analyzed the situation and knew that he would not survive until he reached the nearest village. In that instant, he felt anger, panic, pain and indignation at knowing he was nearing the end of his life. He thought of his friends, of the many things he still hadn't done, of his family and the impotence of not being able to do anything, of not being able to ask for help. After a few minutes, calmer, he thought about what he could do with the hours he had left. He realized that there was nothing he could do to stay alive and that the wisest thing to do would be to lie down in the snow and wait for the cold to take over his body, numbing his pain and allowing him to rest for the last few moments. The comfort he laid down then, looking up at the blue sky. Even in that situation, it was still possible to admire the beauty of the place. He pushed thoughts away from the pain he was feeling and began to remember the children he would not see grow up and his wife, whom he loved so dearly. It was difficult to accept this situation, but it was impossible to get out of it. His comfort was remembering that they would not be destitute, because, due to his risky profession, he had good life insurance with enough coverage to guarantee a stable life for his family for a long time. He knew that as soon as his death certificate was published, the insurance company would hand over the money. It was at that moment that Guillermo's heart started beating again. His policy said that the insurance would only be paid with the presentation of the death certificate, and in that inaccessible place, without anyone knowing where he was, his body would never be found. He would have been reported missing and would not have a death certificate. It would be years before he was officially presumed dead. I must go somewhere where my body can be found, he thought then. But how? The pain was too much, but his determination and his thoughts of his family were even greater. He knew that region and knew that at the foot of the mountain there was a village that the inhabitants went up to a certain point of the mountain to hunt, and that way they could find his body. The distance was long, but he needed to get as close as possible to have any chance of his body being found. So he gathered all his remaining strength and got up, screamed in pain and almost fainted, but he didn't fall. The journey he started his journey knowing he couldn't go very far, the pain was great and the distance too. He walked for about 2 hours until he couldn't walk anymore. He was exhausted and in a lot of pain. His legs were stiff. He couldn't walk anymore. He stopped thinking about it and defined for himself, I'll just go one step further, that's my goal. With great difficulty he took another step, and it was a victory. It seemed more important than what he had done so far, so he thought again, just one more step. He concentrated all his effort on taking that step and he succeeded. And so, establishing a positive conditioning and looking at a step, without thinking about where he was and without thinking about when he still had to go, Guillermo continued on his way, all day. It was then at the end of the afternoon, with blurred vision, that he glimpsed in the distance movements that he imagined were people. He took a deep breath and his thoughts went back to his family and he whispered to himself, now I can die. He dropped his helpless body and the darkness took him. Days later, he opened his eyes and saw his wife next to him. He imagined he was in heaven, but realized Some fingers were amputated from his leg, which was frozen by snow, but he was still alive and with his family. And that, my friends, was Guillermo's story, which also helps us reflect on our lives. Forget the impossible, focus on the possible. On several occasions, we find ourselves in situations we don't know how to get out of or we think we have no way out. What we are looking for is distant, almost immaterial. The idea that is almost always repeated is that there is no solution. The problem is bigger than the solution. Sometimes we are not sure why we want to change. Because we want to solve this problem or because we want to achieve what we are looking for. As we achieve this vision, new energy and motivation arises. In Guillermo's case, although the objective was to survive, he was fully convinced, due to his injuries and the distance at which he was, that this would be impossible. But when he shifted his thinking and purpose to something that was more important to him than his own life, his family, he was able to muster the energy and walk. Forgetting what was impossible and thinking about what was possible. Look how the changed purpose and motivation was enough to make a change in his thinking and behavior. It wasn't about him, it was about his family. And then, even with his motivation and strength, he felt like he couldn't do it anymore. This is very common. Sometimes we have a very good energy to start with, but gradually this energy goes down, the problems start to take over again. The distance because we are looking for it is noticed again, and with that the thoughts of giving up come back. It was at that moment that he set a goal, small and short, in which he only had to worry about taking one more step. He only took a step to celebrate, because a step increased the chances of being found. That's why, celebrating each step, he managed to walk for miles. If his thought had been, I only need to walk another 2 kilometers, he would have given up. In our life, this happens too. Sometimes it's a debt, a trip, an illness, a relationship, a career, a good that we want to buy, and we can only see the end that is very far away and throughout the journey. The shadow of giving up is there, questioning you, raising doubts about your ability to achieve, simply because you don't see your journey on the horizon. Breaking it down into shorter and shorter goals and celebrating your achievements will give you even more motivation to continue the journey towards a greater purpose. Now stop and think, is there something you tried to do, did it or became something you didn't do because you think the distance is too great? If you have, do like Guillermo. Revise your purpose and your motivation, so that it is unshakable and so you know where you want to go and why. Break it down into goals so you can celebrate each step of your journey. If you liked a story about goals, motivation and purpose, please leave a like and subscribe.